They believe their own propaganda. All this Taiwan stuff. Now, I am going to be of a minority here in that I don't think a Taiwan war is going to happen. Let me kind of lay that out for you. There are certain assumptions that you make when you're planning on conquering another country, and they guide your military transformation so that you're ready for the fight. The problem is that the Ukraine war has laid bare that all of the assumptions that the Chinese have made were wrong. I mean, assumption number one, it's going to be an easy fight. Well, that's been discarded because you have to swim to get to Taipei. You can walk to Kiev. The Ukrainians have been preparing for this war for 8 years. The Taiwanese have been preparing for a war with the mainland for 45. So, gone. Number two, Russian weapons are awesome, so let's steal the IP and clone them, spend $3 trillion outfitting all of our troops. They now know that that was $3 trillion wasted, and they don't have a weapon system appropriate for the game. Assumption number three, Russia's too important to international economics, so no one will punish it. They'll just, bitch, send out some press releases and it'll be over. Error. And say what you will about the Russian economy, it's not great, but it is a massive producer and exporter of food and energy products. The Chinese are the world's largest importer of both. And they import 80% of the inputs that allow them to grow their own food. You take the sanctions on Russia, you put them on Beijing, you get a deindustrialization collapse complete with a famine that kills 500 million people in under 2 years. But I think the fourth one is what's really scared them. You. The entire Western corporate community just walked away. Not because of sanctions, because they didn't want to be affiliated with a genocidal government. They walked away from over $1 trillion of investment in the Russian space. Chairman Xi has no way to even process that. The idea that private citizens have agency. So every aspect of all of their strategic planning for the last half century has gone out the window because of Vladimir Putin. And this is normally where you would take all of your smart people and put them in a back room with some beer and some bourbon and say, don't come out until you can give me a plan B. But Chairman Xi has shot all those people. There's no one left. And so China is slamming its head into the wall over and over and over until something cracks. And the thing that cracks is not going to be Taiwan. And then, of course, there's COVID. I'm going to assume that there's a diversity of well-formed opinions in this room on COVID as well. But I think we can all agree that there's two possible paths here: mass immunization or mass exposure. And I think if we're all being really honest with ourselves, at home, alone, in the dark, with the doors locked and the shades pulled, we will admit that the other side has a point or two that is worthy of consideration. Is that fair? Can't do that in China. We know from data from third countries that the Chinese vaccines don't work. And until very recently, the Chinese have been very successful at keeping COVID out of the general population, so no one had natural immunity. Well, we're now dealing with a challenge to Xi personally. Those protests that happened over Thanksgiving, they started with COVID, but it spread very rapidly, and this is one of the dangers of one-man rule. When the buck starts and stops with you, when anything goes wrong, everything goes wrong, because there's no backup source of legitimacy. This isn't the United States, where we've got academia and local government, state government and national government, and the business community and religious organizations and civic organizations. There is no civil society in China. And so when something cracks anywhere, every bit of discontent on everything boils up, and it all targets the source of the legitimacy, the one thing, Chairman Xi personally. And so he gave in, and now COVID is ravaging the population that is unprotected. The lowest number of fatality estimates that I have seen so far are 1.5 million. Remember, this is a country with over triple the population of the United States, with a less advanced healthcare system, especially for critical care. There are 7 variants circulated in the PRC right now. 4 of them we didn't know anything about 2 months ago. They didn't exist. So we have no data on how bad this is going to get. Because the Chinese, very Chinese of them, decided that rather than report fake data, they're just going to stop collecting data at all. So we just don't know. But this is very likely a regime-challenging system. And it could very well be a regime-ending event, because the one source of legitimacy is now being challenged each and every day across the entire system. In case you're still bullish on China, I'll give you one more reason. Let's talk tech. There's this weird belief in a lot of the world, especially the United States, that China and the United States are somehow technological peers. They are not. China cannot produce the high-end chips or the mid-quality chips. They can only do the low-end chips. So like, your singing margarita machine, that they make. But they can only make them with equipment that is imported and with tools and software that are imported and with workers who are brought in to do the quality checks that have to happen on every disk every single day. That's all imported labor too. What the Biden administration has done in the last couple of months is says you can't import the high-level chips, you can't import the middle-quality chips, you can't import the equipment or the software or the tools. And any American working in that sector now has to choose between their job and their citizenship. And within 24 hours of that policy change, every American in the entire sector either quit or was transferred abroad. Folks, it's already over. And anything that comes from tech is already over. That's AI, that's automation, that's the Great Firewall, that's the social credit monitoring system, that's the hypersonic weapons program. It's all already over. China can assemble, and that's not nothing, but a technological peer it will never be. Okay. Oh, you beef guys are in trouble. Every time there's been a hiccup in China in the last 3 years, the beef guys are like, I bet this is an opportunity to sell more to the Chinese. It's like the pork guys have flipped. They've realized the writing on the wall. They've realized this is not a stable market long term, and they've diversified away. They've reduced the herd. You guys in beef are going to have to do this on a much more compressed time scale. Best get ready for it. All right, let's talk finance. Sorry, my hair is falling apart here. I haven't had long hair since I was like 19, so I'm still learning. What we're looking at here is total net worth by decade of age. As you get older, you get better at your career, your income increases, but the real magic happens when you turn 50. Because when you turn 50, your single biggest expense, your last kid, moves out and is someone else's problem. And the money that you save, you then use to pay down your second biggest expense, which is typically your house. And by 55 on average, you've paid that down to zero. So the last decade before you retire, 55 to 65, that's the wealthiest you will ever be. Your expenses are under control, your income's the highest it will ever be. This is 70% of global private capital. This is what drives the system. This is literally where the money is. And then you retire. And when you retire, you liquidate your stocks and your bonds and you go into T-bills and cash. Because if there's a market crash or if there is a currency crash, you no longer have the income that's necessary to recover. Very typical, very normal. You go more conservative with your portfolio. And typically it hasn't mattered because typically we've had a demographic structure that looks like this. Children at the bottom, young adults, mature adults, retirees at the top, men on one